What's up, guys, and welcome back to my reading journey. Hope you're all doing great. Thank you for coming back to the next video. We are beginning with a new story. It's Law and Order. I found myself in Texas recently, revising old places and vistas. Vistas. At a sheep ranch where I had sojourned many years ago, I stopped for a week. And as well visitors do, I heartily plunged into the business at hand, which happened to be that of dipping this ship. Dipping the ship. Now, the process is so is so different from ordinary human baptism that it deserves a word of itself. A vast iron cauldron, cauldron with half the fires of Avernus beneath is it is partially filled with water that soon fires boils furiously. Into that is concentrated lime, and sulfur, which is allowed to stew and fume until the witcher's broth is strong enough to scorch the third arm of Paladino herself. Then the concentrated brew is mixed in a long, deep wet with cubic gallons of hot water, and the sheep are caught by their hind legs and flung into the compound. Flung. After being thoroughly dogged by means of a fork pole in the hands of a gentleman detailed for that purpose, they are allowed to clamber up, and incline into a coral and dry or die, as the state of their constitutions may decree. If you ever caught an able-bodied 2-year old mutton by the hind legs and felt the 750 watts of kicking that he can send through your arm 17 times before you can hurl him into the water. You will, of course, hope that he may die instead of dry. But this is merely to explain why Bud Oakley and I gladly stretch ourselves on the bank of the nearby Charo after the dipping, glad for the welcome in Inaniton, in Inaniton, welcome Inaniton, and pure concat with the earth after our muscle-wrecking labors. The flock was a small one, and we finished at 3 in the afternoon, but Bud brought from the moral of his saddlehorn coffee and a coffee pot and a big hunk of bread and some side bacon. Mr. Mills, the ranch owner, and my old friend rode away to the ranch with his force of Mexican trab, trabajo, traba, trabajadors. While the bacon was freezing nicely, freezing, freezing, freeze, frizzling, frizzling. Nicely, there was the sound of horses' hoofs behind us. But six-shooter lay in its scabbard, 10 feet away from his hand. Scabbard. He paid not the slightest heed to the approaching horseman. This attitude of a Texas ranchman was so different from the old-time custom that I marveled. Instinctively, I turned to inspect the possible foe that menaced us in the rear. I saw a horseman dressed in black who might have been a lawyer or a parson, or another undertaker, trotting peaceably, along the road by the arroyo, but noticed my precautionary movement, and slimed sarcastically and sorrowfully. "You've been away too long," said he. "You don't need to look around anymore when anybody gallops up behind you in this state unless something hits you in the back. And even then, it's liable to be only a bunch of tracts or a petition to sign against the trusts. I never looked at the hombre that rode by, but I'll bet a quart of a ship dip that he's some double-dyed son of a pop gun out rounding up prohibition votes." "Time has have changed, Bud," said I oracularly. "Law and order is the rule now in the South and the Southwest." I caught a cold gleam from Bud's pale blue eyes. "Not that I began hastily. "Of course you don't," said Bud warmly. You know better. You've lied here before. Law and order, you say? 20 years ago we had them here. We only had or three laws, such as against murder before witnesses and being caught stealing horses and voting the Republican ticket. But how is it now? All we get is orders, and the laws go out of the state. Damn legislators set up there at Austin and don't do nothing but make laws against kerosene oil and school books being brought into the state. I reckon they was afraid some man would go home some evening after work and light up and get an education and go to work and make laws to repeal aforesaid laws. Aforesaid. Me, I'm not for the old days when law and order meant what they said. A law was a law, and order was an order. "But," I began. "I was going on," continued Bud. "While this coffee is boiling, to describe to you a case of genuine law and order that I knew of once in the times when cases was decided in the chambers of a six-shooter instead of Supreme Court. You've heard of Ben Kirkman, the Cattle King? His ranch ran from the Nueces to the Rio Grande. In them days, as you know, there was cattle barons and cattle kings. The difference was this: when a cattleman went to St. Anthony and bought beer for the newspaper reporters and only give them the number of cattle he actually owned, they wrote him up. For a baron. When he bought them a champagne wine and added in the amount of cattle he had stole, they called him a king. Alright, guys. We're gonna finish for today and see you tomorrow on the next part. Thank you for joining. That's a long story, by the way. See you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.